How plans and spatial qualities work together to form buildings and mass production of houses. Symbolism following function or function following symbolism. Ornamentation is a limiting factor detrimental to the growth as a culture and society. Including ornamentation is wasteful, and eliminating ornamentation shows positive progress in society. Ornamentation is viewed as unnecessary excess in both interpretations of the reading. There is a consensus that ornamentation can and will date a design, although some argue that ornamentation has its place in design. The Industrial Revolution in Britain brought with it major changes with technology, socially, economically, and also within architecture and construction. It introduced many new types of buildings and methods to build them. Although most of the art and architecture was kept in a revival manner throughout the century, there were those who believed in a change, in a revolutionary way of building, moving forward rather than staying in the past. In that revolutionary way of thinking, functionality was the aspect to be addressed by designers. Religion, holiness, and God were no longer major aspects to be represented. Ornamentation and symbolism, which were greatly used to represent God in earlier architectures, were also not important aspects, not because it was no longer believed in, but because they were not functional. They were considered mere decoration, meaning not useful, and even at some point a waste or a cause for a slow cultural development. As mentioned in Adolf Loos' essay, Ornament and Crime, with the new introduction of technologies and materials, the new belief in favor of functionality and against ornamentation and symbolism, and the need for a temporary structure that could hold the World's Fair great exhibition while maintaining the trees in Hyde Park comes to life. The Crystal Palace by Sir Joseph Paxton, a horticulturist that believed in the newfound possibilities of glass houses and contemplated the use of fully glazed structures as a mean to create new types of environments and experiences for human beings. Paxton brought the functionality aspect into the table of the board, which was not very accepted at first due to the major distance the design had from the revival wave that hit the century. However, it was the most affordable and temporary design presented, not only because it was the mass production of cast iron glass panels and the easy assembly of those parts, but also because of the lack of ornamentation, which took time, effort, exclusivity, and personal dedication, which was not very related to the temporary building, meaning that it had to be left behind in favor of fulfilling the first and most important request for this building: ephemerality. As time progresses, so do the architectural theories that we abide by. Our architecture helps record the history and societal context of the time it was built. Symbolism is one of the primary expressions of this. Through physical symbolism, form, time, events, or feelings can manifest through the built form and evoke a highly effective and universal expression of representation. In the past, physical symbolism was the primary expression found in religious structures, and these symbolic forms helped to affirm the religion to the people. As time moved on, the idea of using ornamentation in excess to represent religious ideas fell to the wayside. Adolf Loos describes this in his piece, Ornament and Crime. Ornamentation becomes excess, unnecessary, and even considered depleting of a society. However, it is interesting to see the opposite being considered in the Royal Salt Works. This mining community, developed by Claude Nicolas Ledoux in 1779, was symbolically an expression of the importance of salt during its society. The salt works are designed according to the hierarchical relationship found between the workers and the buildings. Symbolism and ornamentation are used heavily throughout the project, reinforcing the ideas of time and maintaining its historical context. Towards a New Architecture, written by Le Corbusier. Overall, there is an important connection between elements when it comes to design. Whether it's positive or negative, specific elements coexist. Designers must acknowledge this and continue to make important changes. Throughout the reading, there was a consensus between the elements of having a set of plans to create designs, specific qualities which lead the design, and delineated roles in the design of a project. This brutal structure is interpreted in many different ways due to its lack of ornamentation and simple material choices. When you strip this detail away, it could come to mind that the structure couldn't be as successful. But when you strip away the ornamentation, you can see what really lies underneath, the deeper meaning. Just because the Boston City Hall is a strongly articulated mass of concrete, brick, and deeply shaded openings set off by a large paved plaza doesn't mean that it isn't a well thought out building. In 1976, it was voted the 8th best building in the United States. This structure was heavily scrutinized upon completion by the public. This idea that it was voted one of the best buildings in the history of the United States says something more. You need to look deeper into the meaning behind the forms. I argue that those outside of the professional discourse interpret architecture fundamentally different ways, through different lenses. It might just be difficult for people to look past the contrast of the adjoining buildings and the history in the city because brutalism incorporates a radical aesthetic of anti-beauty. The concept of a successful building stems from its past. You need this harmony between physical symbolism, but also philosophical symbolism. At first, you might see a simple material and mass, but digging deeper into the cultural values and aesthetic qualities built into the structures, you can see how it becomes successful. The Crystal Palace plan was divided into sections and partitions, with every country having its own area. Germany built the pavilion for the Barcelona International Exposition. It was built in 1929 with a modern style. In March 1896, Louis H. Sullivan wrote an essay which discussed the construction of high-rise office buildings. Sullivan lists his solution to the many problems associated with building tall. For him, the solution could be found in nature. He wrote, "All things in nature have a shape, that is to say, a form, an outward semblance, that tells us what they are, that distinguishes them from ourselves and from each other. It is pervaded law of all things, that the life is recognizable in its expression, that form ever follows function." Sullivan formulated one of the most popular architectural principles in his article. He claimed that the form follows function, and all building types should obey this universal rule. However, when it comes to symbolism and traditions, Sullivan's ideas seem to be pretty controversial. The complexity of the interconnections between functional issues, historical events, ancient traditions, and the unique symbolic additions which make it impossible to state if a function follows symbolism, or symbolism follows function. A good example of this dilemma is the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe. It is not clear if the nature of the Barcelona Pavilion is breaking classical rules or following them. The main reason for this is a question if a building can be modern if it serves to old-fashioned society. The pavilion was exclusively a place for ceremonies. 2 chairs were designed specifically for the Queen and King of Spain, while everybody else had to use stools. Moreover, 2 tables were created to satisfy the needs of a champagne ceremony following the inauguration. Meanwhile, the building should have praised modern Germany itself. Various transparent materials showed the reliability of Germany, while using the colors of the flag, captured the national pride and identity. The photo capturing the King of Spain next to the oversized statue also talks for itself. The Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe appears to be almost a temple praising modern Germany. Relation to the existing Ionic columns, raised platform, ceremonial room, or maybe even a cella, and other structural details questioning the absolute novelty of the building. You can see the floor plans of the earlier version of the Barcelona Pavilion, a typical Greek temple, and the Erechtheion. The floor plan of the Erechtheion is mostly dictated by existing landmarks and circulation between them. Hiding and revealing via movement seems to be an ancient strategy. This way, the Barcelona Pavilion even functions almost like a temple, thanks to the symbolism of the separate elements. The Builder is a debate on the issue of reviving old architectural styles in architecture, which Ferguson calls copyism. He defended this point against A.W.N. Pugin and Edward Lacy Garbett, who supported Gothic revival and the authenticity of buildings designed in that style. The point of their debate were then revisited by Robert Kerr in a lecture of his titled Copyism in Architecture. Ferguson suggested replacing the act of copying Gothic and Greek architecture with 3 rules that would allow every country to have a style of their own. That a building should be designed entirely for its purpose. That it should be built with the best materials available. and that the building's ornamentation should be designed in an appropriate way that doesn't hide either the materials or the construction of the building. He believed that this was the way for every country to create a style of its own, so that it doesn't need to copy the styles of the past. Mackintosh built the Hill House in Helensburgh, Scotland, with a similar ideology. He first designed the interior to fit the needs of the occupants of the house, and only after that did he design the exterior. He spent time with the family to understand the way they lived in order to design their spaces. He then constructed the house with traditional Scottish building techniques. The building also has steep roofs and a variety of windows in the walls of different shapes and sizes that are designed for the spaces they are illuminating. While presenting the finished building, Mackintosh stated that he built was a humble dwelling rather than a villa, castle, or mansion. First, ornament is akin to thoughtful detailing and simplicity of form. Second, ornamentation has its place in design, but shouldn't be overdone. And lastly, spatial organization has a deep impact on functionality and the perception of a structure.